Hey, back in Cool, we in here. Happy Resurrection Sunday, by the way. Getting this pick your muncher together. So, anyways, got a few more weeks and then we're gonna start dieting down, get ready for this whole little prep scenario. If you don't know, you're gonna find out. But today I want to talk about sorry, I'm getting this food together. Today I want to talk about something. Now, conversation came up, with some vital organizations losing funding and people are worried about that. I'll just raise the point that if we took our health into our own hands for the most part, communities, a lot of those entities wouldn't be needed in the same way that they're currently needed because 7 out of the top 10 of our main killers, 7 out of the top 10, really 8, but 7 are lifestyle induced conditions or conditions that can be improved on. You can have a favorable outcome if you are in better health. One of the things that came up that was mentioned was lack of access to healthy foods and this concept of the food desert. Now, I know what a food desert is. You probably know what a food desert is. When I grew up, we didn't call it a food desert. We just called it not having options, right? And the reason why I'm talking about this is because every time I mention a community taking responsibility for itself, everyone gets mad at me. I'm not saying the individual as in themselves, although you are an adult, but when you're a kid, you don't have those options. If you're not a self-starter, that's on you. Basically, you're responsible for yourself. But the community, even if you're not, should be looking out for you. And I do firmly believe that. Now, I grew up in a food desert, as they would now call it. How did my community respond? Farmers markets, different days, different locations, community gardens where everybody can go. They can grow their vegetables or whatever they want to grow. People could come in, they can get it, etc., etc. Community center that I worked at, we taught kids nutrition and different recipes that they can actually use to make nutritious snacks, meals, etc., right? So now, if you want to still make excuses, that's on you. But that was a community response. The community at large needs to start really helping itself out. Now, big issue is lack of resources. There are people in every community that some way, somehow has resources. Oh, another thing that the community did was people that had the resources and the ability, they started making stores and putting markets into the neighborhood. And this is an impoverished neighborhood that had these little things and these different health foods that people can access and buy. But so those who didn't have cars, they can easily get to where they needed to go, buy the things that they needed to buy. Because every community has success stories. They usually just don't go back to the community for various reasons. However, when the community takes care of itself, the community is able to sustain itself. Most black and brown communities are poor and impoverished. I'm going to tell you, they were better off before the civil rights era. If you look at the statistics, the civil rights era it did a lot of good things and a lot of bad things came out of it as well. Not directly related to civil rights, but various things that just happened after that time period. And in my estimation, one of the biggest things that happened was over-reliance and faith in the government. Communities now don't rely on themselves. When they need help, they don't come together as communities and figure out how can we rectify the issue. They look for legislation, they go to the government, they go to these programs. When we talk about all the good things that the Black Panther Party did, I know that's controversial, but the government took a lot of their programs and nationalized it and implemented it more poorly. But even like with the free meals for the children and all of that, it's a big one. That was a community response. So what I'm saying is we don't need the government to create these programs. We as a community can create these programs, pull together, maybe even be willing for the greater good, take the hit and sacrifice so that we're able to sustain ourselves and not rely on an outside entity. If they cut the funding, if they cut the program, who cares? Because we can take care of ourselves. Now, there are some things that where we're at. So some people have ailments that they've already developed, certain things that they do need help treating. That's true. We need to try to do something about that. I'm not saying the community can meet all needs. Some conditions, they're just going to come. There's not much you can do. However, there are roughly 80 autoimmune diseases in this country, the United States, that are directly influenced by our diets, mainly because they're highly inflammatory. And this sets off the immune system. We're not going to get all into that in this video because this is for the average person. Average person doesn't comprehend all of that. That's not their job. But what I can say is there is data out there. You can look it up. Y'all got PubMed, Google Scholar. If you want some links, I can provide them if you really want. But they do trigger autoimmune disorders. They may not be the root cause because all of these things have also a genetic component to it. However, what I will tell you is there's a reason we see more autoimmune diseases than we did in the past. More autoimmune diseases in the United States than we do in certain other countries. It's because of the food, how we're preparing the food, and the fact that we have these highly palatable, highly processed foods and people are consuming them en masse. There's a reason why in the past you didn't see this. Most of the food wasn't processed like it is today. But genetics load the gun. They don't fire the gun necessarily. Sometimes the gun may go off and you just get what you get. But most of the time, genetics will stack the case against you. But your lifestyle, environmental factors, your diet will then determine what happens. Okay, so as we get more into this, what that means is also the community taking responsibility. A lot of times, companies will move into lower income neighborhoods that release a lot of pollution because people are desperate for jobs. They know they can get away with that. And people are not really knowledgeable enough to really know the impacts of the pollution to realize a lot of ailments that we face that we then get sick with are from these jobs. And they understand that. That's why they move into certain communities. You're not really going to go to a nice community and see like a McDonald's or nothing like that neither. They always are in poor communities. McDonald's is expensive. If you can go to McDonald's, you can go out to eat for real. Food's trash. Knowledge is the key. Now, what I'm saying is this. If we educate as a community, because there are people in every community that has the knowledge. Some people think that these people are crazy or whatever, but there's people that have the knowledge. There's a person that knows all about working out and nutrition. Even if they're not like at a master level, they know at least more than the average person in that community. You can go to them. They can help you out. They can assist. There's somebody that knows about this pollution, and people are just, oh, well, whatever. I don't care about that. Listen to them, because when they try to come into your neighborhood or you see something going up and it's going to ruin the air quality, the water quality, you can address it. We know that there's certain demographics that deal with certain ailments and mental disorders. Cognitive disorders. I got to be careful because people are sensitive, even though we know what we're all talking about. A lot of those neighborhoods have heavy metals and everything, even in the paint still, because the housing is old and all this stuff. Well, guess what? When somebody can educate these people on those things, we could go and clear that out. There are people that buy houses and fix them up and have all of these skills in pretty much all of these communities. May not be the majority of the community, but when the people who have the skills, these individual skills, actually get together and work in concert, the community as a whole improves, even if it's still poor and impoverished. What happens now is we don't do that. We look to the government or some outside entity and we have a woe is me mentality. When it should be woe is us, because we're a community. And then on top of that, what can we do? Nobody cares about your community like you care about the community. So when I say the community needs to start knowing what it needs to do, I mean everyone in the community needs to do their part. We have educators on an academic level. We have educators in nutrition, physical fitness. We have educators who know how to put the herbs and everything together. People will say, oh, well, that doesn't work. You've been going to the doctors your whole life and you're still sick. I know people that, not these sound, like we're not talking about carrot juice. We're talking about people that really know what to do. And I can hook you up with a guy because his results speak for themselves. I will never promote something that I don't know or I haven't seen the results from. 100%. So that's why I tell you guys about the same guy if y'all need it. But we need to, as a community, all communities, start taking the power back, start taking the responsibility back. people get upset mainly because when you start talking like this, they feel like they're saying it's their fault. It is your fault. But guess what? Even if you're ignorant and that's why it's your fault, it's still your fault. And life doesn't care about ignorance. So you've been eating a bad diet, you triggered an autoimmune disease, you got cancer, something like that, you're obese, and then your obesity triggered, other ailments. And you can be unhealthy and not obese, by the way. You can have other things going on. If you get obese first, a lot of times that's good because you at least have an outward sign. Some people don't do that. They just get the ailments. So, yeah. It's not saying that you're a bad person. You just didn't know. That's why there are educators, and educators in the community need to educate, but people need to listen. And we need to all come together with one goal in our communities and get it together. Now you're saying, how does this relate to what you started talking about? Because you're talking about a broad subject for the most part. How does this relate to food deserts? But that was a serious issue that people saw. The food desert. That's a common issue across the country. We're not getting into the meat and mosa because even when I went from being literally, I lost like 40, 50 pounds in under a year. When I made that change in my life, I didn't have access to healthy foods. I had the food that I had. But guess what? Other people from impoverished neighborhoods, from food deserts, gave me the knowledge that I was able to use and take advantage. And I was on the cusp of a few different health conditions. I was able to reverse that. That's where that knowledge comes in. So the food desert is an excuse because you're still going to be eating what you're eating, even if you weren't in the food desert. Now you may throw some other stuff in there potentially, but most of the time when people gain access, they still keep eating what they're eating. That's not the problem. But even if it is the problem, the reason why I'm saying that the community response was so important is because the community solved an issue that just sitting there waiting for the government or complaining about wouldn't be able to solve. People who could built gardens, taught the kids how to garden. Anybody else who wanted to, how to garden. What do you want planted? What do you want planted? Planted it. Made it open and available for the community. Farmers markets came in. We're going to be at this location. We're going to be at that location. If they sold it, they sold it. Sometimes they would say, hey, come get what you want. Limited quality. And if they didn't do it for everyone, they would just say, hey, for the elders, you can have this, this, and that. Everybody else, this is what the price is. The community came together. So we didn't talk about food deserts. Everyone now wants to make impoverished people seem like victims and helpless. That's learned helplessness. We got options. Ben had options. That's how people have survived. You gotta take the power back. You gotta stop looking for somebody else to save you and realize that you are already given the power to save yourself and each other. Everyone has their part. The reason why we're worse off than we were in the past is people always say, we're not talking about 50 years ago. We're not talking about even 40 years ago, right? Or 30 years ago. Because we're not a community. That's the main thing. That's the main thing. So, I don't know what you guys think about this. I know I don't use notes, so somewhat all over the place a little bit. But that food desert comment is a common one that I hear in various shapes and forms. And it's hard to educate somebody when you're not directly talking to them or working with them on how they can still make the best of their situation. But as a community, we can definitely do that and make the best out of what we have. So comment, let me know what you guys think. And yeah, because that's a valid, because if you're ignorant, that's a real confusion and real concern. And the way health is taught and nutrition is taught on that most basic level in schools is trash. They tell you, don't eat this and that, eat apples and oranges. Then they send you to lunch and give you nachos and cheese. So I don't blame the populace for being confused on that. Even the government website is telling you things are fruits that are not fruits and this, that, and the third. How you going to act?